On this episode of the Happy Holy Hour, we're going to be interviewing chaplain and counselor and pastor Reverend Ben Alvira and his story from going from being a drug lord in Philadelphia to being used by God to bring others to Christ.
Yeah, this episode was supposed to be one episode, but it ended up being so long. His story was so captivating that we split it into two. So stick around for this one. The first episode will be more about his backstory and his context, and then we're going to do another episode on his ministry and where he was at.
It's going to have you on the edge of your seat, and some parts are jaw-dropping, so you do not want to miss this one.
Welcome to the Happy Holy Hour, a podcast where everyday Christians grow in their faith through biblical examination and insightful discussion. I'm glad you're here today. If you enjoy the content you're about to hear, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and visit us at thehappyholyhour.org. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Happy Holy Hour, where everyday Christians grow in their faith through biblical examination and insightful discussion. I'm Travis, and I'm here with Tyler, and we have a special guest with us, Reverend Ben Alvira. Before we get started, if you're a first-time listener to the show, we want to say thank you for tuning in and listening. If you want to subscribe and give a review and like us on whatever platform you're listening to right now, we'd really appreciate that. Uncle Ben, I've really wanted to have you on for some time. I met you back in, I believe it was 2016. I was an intern at a camp in Pennsylvania, and your wife was working there. And through that, you guys were kind enough to take us lonely interns in and kind of adopt us into your family and have us over for dinner and do Bible studies. You guys did a really great job of taking care of us and keeping us alive. Well, I know we really appreciate that. So you guys have just meant a lot to me personally over the years since then. But you're retired, sort of. I know you're still doing a lot. never fully retired. OPC pastor, and you're a counselor in a hospital. You've been a counselor and a hospital chaplain. You took multiple courses from Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, and you got your MDiv from Reformed Episcopal Seminary, and you also have a degree in counseling, and you're a certified counselor. So that's a lot going on there. It's so good to have you with us, and it's been a long time that I've wanted to have you on, so I'm really excited that we're finally able to do this interview. I know that you've been mightily used for the Lord and have served Him faithfully for many years, but it didn't always start out that way, and I know you have an incredible testimony and story to share with us. Would you mind telling us a little bit kind of where you grew up and what it was like before you came to Christ? I know you grew up in Philadelphia a number of years ago, probably pretty different from the city we know of now.
No, it's not.
No, same thing?
No, it's just as bad. Now, I believe it's gotten worse because of this war, with the people, and then battling with the police. And so it's gotten pretty scary. Some of my friends have been beaten up. So no, it's not good to live in most parts of Philadelphia right now. Sort of the same thing like with Seattle.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay. I was born in Puerto Rico. I came to the States into Philly when I was 2 years old. My parents brought me, my older brother, my older sister, and we immediately lived in the inner city, Philadelphia. Now, when I was young, it was a nice place to live. It got worse and worse and worse. And so that's sort of my background. I went to, my mother was a card-carrying Pentecostal, and my father was a card-carrying drunk. And I say this with love because he would have said it. So that's the environment that I was in. I went to church, watch this one, mostly about 6 days a week.
Wow.
Hispanic Pentecostal churches are like that. So I would get up in the morning, go to school, come home, eat, get dressed, go to church. The services would last between 2 to 6 hours.
Wow.
You got that one? Go home. I did that continually. As I grew older, I really didn't like Well, the only church that I knew was a Pentecostal church. And I saw these preachers that were thieves. When I was young, I went to a revival where the Phillies play baseball now. And there were two guys that are famous. One is Jimmy Swagger, and the other one is Jim Jones, who both of them were at the time doing the circuit together. I was asked to come forward. I was 9 years old, and they, quote unquote, lay hands on me because they believed that the Lord was talking to them, that God was going to use me. Well, now I would speak, I could shout. So I did, quote unquote, I went on revivals at 9 years old. I was standing in front of 500-600 people, sometimes even a lot more than that, and shouting verses. But I saw in the background where the people that were counting the money, that was the thing. How much did we collect? How much did we collect? And so I came to the conclusion that Christianity was just a joke. It was these guys were making money. And so when I turned 15, I left the church. Swore never to go again. Remember, I didn't know anything about Presbyterians, about Baptists, except that they were dry and dead, and they didn't believe in the Holy Spirit. Excuse me. And so for a number of years then, at that age, 15, 16, I started with drugs in Philly. First I took them, and then I sold them. And it was from morning to night. It was first marijuana, hashish. Then I took cocaine. One of my favorites was to take acid and go on quote unquote trips. Quaaludes, speed, so I could stay awake for hours. Basically, I should have been dead with all the drugs that I was taking. And I did that for a number of years. I lived in the street. I remember 2 winters where I left my house. My father couldn't take it. And my mom didn't want me to leave. She just wanted me to leave the drugs. But I was so anti-Christianity that my mom told me one day that all I need is Jesus in my heart. And I took a plate of food and I threw it at her. You did not talk to me about Christianity. That would just anger me completely. I lived in abandoned buildings, very dangerous because I live in one winter. Remember, there was no heat, freezing, and I got into this closet, and that was my home in this abandoned house. I stole blankets from stores, so I kept it warm. Problem: the drug addicts would come at night to get high, and when they found out that there was somebody in that closet, they tried to break in. And so I had to then, one day I remember I had a knife. I knew how to use a knife, and I fought my way out. So that was basically my life for years. That was all that I knew. At the age of 16, the only human being that lived a Christian life before me, who was supposed to marry my sister, he went to the war in Vietnam and he was killed. You know who I blame for that one, right? I blame God. And when I found out that he had been killed, I cursed God. And I became more of an atheist. And basically, I wanted to control the drugs in Philadelphia. And I wanted to watch this one, church-going young guys, get them out of church and get them high. Not because I liked them, not because I wanted them to be my friend, because they were out. They were not part of our group, and so they were outcasts. Plus, I was a member of a gang that were called the Stars, and so we hang together and we fought wars, battled with other gangs, and I continue to do that. Hey, tell me when you want me to stop and you want to ask another question.
No, that's good. Keep filling us in, whatever you feel like you have to share. Okay. And then, maybe share, this is going on for a number of years, you said, and you were antagonistic towards anything Christian in Christianity as a whole. How did you go from, being totally against Christianity to becoming a Christian yourself? You were raised in the Pentecostal church. Did you hear the gospel growing up? Did you understand it? How did you go from completely against Christianity to becoming a Christian? Where did you first hear the gospel, and who was kind of instrumental in leading you to the Lord?
Okay, this is going to be a shocker, a surprise. Okay, I got married to my wife. Now it's 48 years. My whole family and friends and acquaintances, my wife's family, they thought that we wouldn't last 2 years. Now we're going on 48. So the Lord has blessed us. But when I met her, she used to be Pentecostal. But when I met her at a nightclub, at a dance. And I looked and I go, wow, she got pants on. Pentecostal girls were not allowed to wear pants, no makeup, couldn't cut your hair, couldn't shave. Seriously. And I looked and I go, wow, she looks human. And she weighed like 98 pounds. And so I talked to her. At first, before that, she had seen me in the Pentecostal church. But we would just go and stay outside and laugh at the girls. She really didn't like me at first. But then I talked to her. We went out. And a few months later, she was pregnant. A few months later, we got married. My mom and my dad told me, you better do the right thing. Abortion was not a question. That was out. Even for me, I didn't like it. And so we got married. I don't remember much of my wedding because I was so stoned. When the pastor said, "Did you take this woman?" my response was, "Huh?" And then I said, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" They couldn't find me for 2 hours in the reception because I went out with a friend and we were getting stoned.
Wow.
I was just from beginning to end. I worked, so I was a working junkie, but I had a job because since I was dealing drugs, I had to show that I had income. Because if I didn't have income, that's the way they were getting the drug dealers.
Right.
How can you buy a car? How can you buy a house? How can you buy this if you don't have an income? You're not working. So I worked to be able to sell drugs. And the place that I worked in, I used to sell drugs even to the owner's son and daughter. And so, but here's what happened. Okay. Here is the big shocker. Okay. A guy that used to work with me dealing. In fact, he was also my bodyguard. Big guy, Kevin. Oh, I shouldn't have used his name. Well, I used the first name anyway.
That's fine.
But one day we're getting high. The next morning I go to his house. Okay. And he's smiling and he's happy. And I told him, why didn't you wait for me to get high? And he said, I'm not high. He goes, I'm not going to get high anymore. And then he said, Ben, I know you don't like it, but give me 2 minutes to tell you what happened to me. Just give me 2 minutes. So I said, you got it. And as best he could, because he wasn't reformed, he presented the gospel. And he did a pretty good job on it. Then he told me the next time that we talk about this, you're going to initiate the conversation. Okay? So I said, great. He still would hang with us, but he just wouldn't get high. No matter how much the rest of the guys tried to get him high, he would not. And Kevin was a guy that if you looked at him the wrong way, he'll break off your arm. But now he was as friendly as can be with people. And so that was a shocker. But then there was another guy who was a merchant. He was in the Coast Guard. And the drugs that he confiscated, because he didn't know anything about, dealing or anything, I would take it and I would sell it in Philly. Talking about pounds and pounds and pounds of marijuana. And then he didn't know how much it cost. So I would give him $200 a pound and sell it for $600 right away. Notice the money there.
Mm-hmm.
But I go to his house one day and he and his wife overnight had prayed and they had both of them come to the Lord. And she was pregnant. I think the Lord used that. So now I got and think, what is this God doing to me? Okay? So now I'm getting frustrated. Okay? I break into my parents' home because my father, though he was a drunk, he was a working drunk. In fact, he owned a grocery store in North Philly. And so I broke in and I knew where he kept his money. So I broke in to steal his money. I looked at their bed and there was this white book on top of my mom's pillow. And you have to understand that in Pentecostal females, especially ladies, they'll take the Bible and they'll put it on top of their bed or they'll put it in the living room. And somehow they believe that because they put it there, the wisdom is going to come into their head without them studying it. So my mom had the Bible there. But here was the shocker. My mom did not know English. The Bible was English. It was open to Romans 5:1. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through Jesus Christ. I read the book of Romans. I read the Gospel of John. And for some reason that I could never understand, I read the book of Deuteronomy. I threw the Bible on the bed. And then I left. I didn't steal the money. I left. And I was getting frustrated. Okay? At the time, they had what I call the Superman phone booths. You know, where you could go and for 10 cents make a call. Okay? So I went to a phone booth to make a call. Well, there was a place where you had the phone book, or you could put your the paper that you're going to dial on top of that thing. And there was a Bible tract there, the Roman Road, and it had Romans 5:1. So I started to get frustrated. My wife is noticing that. She's scared. I had a 2-year-old daughter. When I was 17, I attempted suicide. And I took 2 acid tabs. One was enough to kill you, 2 LSD tabs. And I took 120 aspirins. And I didn't throw up for hours. I was hospitalized. But I just didn't care. So my wife knew that I could then get so frustrated that I would kill her and our child and then myself. So she was worried. She was ready to talk to a lawyer. Okay? But she talks to my mom. And my wife asked my mom, did she notice that I'm getting frustrated? And then one day we went to a park. And I did something that I had never done before in front of my wife. I lit up what is called a joint, marijuana. And I took a couple of puffs. And then I threw it away. And my wife said, okay, what's going on with him? Okay. On July the 11th of 1976, that was when we celebrated the bicentennial, I went to the living room and I had a war with God early in the morning. I used every dirty word that I could use. But then my wife told me that there was about an hour of silence. I went to the bedroom and I told my wife, forget about any doctor. I want to talk to a pastor. Okay. Well, the only pastor that she knew was the Pentecostal pastor. This was a nice guy. He wasn't radical. And she used to be his secretary. In fact, he took my wife's mother to the hospital when my wife was born. He's the one that took her. And so I go to his house. This is like 6 o'clock in the morning, knocking on the door. And then I told him that I want to know God. Now, I was raised in his church before he was there. And he said, but Ben, you were in the church. You know about God. And I go, you're right. Because I used to debate Christians. But I told him, I want to know God. Then I asked him for a Bible, and I went to Romans 5:1. And I told him, tell me how I get this. I want peace with God. And as best he could, he presented me with the gospel. And I told him, I'm going to your church. I'm Pentecostal. I'm a Christian first. You ever go against this book, you go against me. And so I started going to the Pentecostal church. And I mean, we went to all the 5 services. My wife got pregnant again. We got a son. My wife got pregnant again. We got a daughter. With our first daughter, there was a problem. This is why before I was a Christian. Because once she was born, my wife went to trauma. She was declared dead because when she was having after she had my daughter, she had a double pneumonia, lung clot, and she wasn't breathing. So I took the baby home, and my wife stayed at the hospital for like 15 more days. Once she got out the hospital, we got another shocker because our daughter has what is called phenylketonuria. Okay, that's a disease where the person is missing that enzyme that breaks down protein. Okay, and so if she took protein, if she ate food with protein, she would either become where her mind was, where she wouldn't grow no more than a second grader, or she would die.
Wow.
And so they had just uncovered this a couple of years before she was born. Okay? They had this medicine, this milk that she would drink. She didn't drink regular milk. That it smelled horrible and it tastes worse. But she liked it because she had it since she was a child. And they gave us a 50-50 chance that she would grow up normal. Forget about high school. PKU kids just don't go to high school. But she also went to college. So that was, wow. But at the time, I was blaming God. Now, once I became a believer, now my wife was pregnant of my son. And again, the doctor told us there is 1 in 100 million chance that he would get PKU. He got it worse than my daughter. A year later, my 2 kids were born the same day, but a year apart. Isn't that something?
Wow.
Wow.
Well, yeah, Memorial Day. And so they told me, watch what the doctor said. Put a 1, put a comma, put zeros, go around the world. She's not going to get PKU. She got it worse than the first 2.
Wow.
But they all went to college. My son just graduated from Shocker Seminary from Westminster, and he has a pastorate now. But PKU kids are not supposed to do that. And in fact, they used my kids as an example. They were written up in some medical journals, etc., because that just doesn't happen. And parents that have PKU kids, they didn't know what they were doing. They would call us up, help us. So it was an opening to present the gospel.
Wow.
And my kids, because they understood the sacrifice. I mean, everything that they ate had to be measured, and only non-protein food. They couldn't have pizza, hamburgers, meat, a cake they couldn't have. So my wife invented an applesauce cake for them. So they knew the hard work. That kept my family together more because my mom, again, who believed in these faith healers, and some family members, my uncles and my mother-in-law, and they would tell us, take the kids to, Jimmy Swagger's in town or this guy's in town. Take them there so they can pray for them. My response was, God is here. If the Lord wants to heal my kids, hey, here they are. But what happened was the Lord used that to keep my family together because the kids just couldn't go haywire. Kept them away from drugs. My children, I have forgotten that I never told them what I used to be. So now my oldest one was like 9, and the other 2 were 5 and 6. And I go to the street service. I took them, in which they had asked me to give part of my testimony. I didn't like giving my testimony because then I would get this response. And I wish that I was like you, but I was raised in the church, and I go, no, your testimony is the best. My 3 kids, they were raised in a Christian home. They don't know what it is to get stoned. What they do know is that God is faithful.
Amen.
In the covenant, He is faithful. They heard my testimony then, and they were shocked. They were crying, and I looked at them and I remember they don't know about my past because it was wicked. I got people hurt, got people beaten up. The best man in my wedding, I'm the one that hooked him up with drugs, and then he died. He OD'd, and so I had to explain it to my children that no, that this is what I used to be. I even had relatives like my wife's relatives who I used to sell drugs to, marijuana to, the best, and they wanted me to tell them where I got it from, but nobody knew, because I would go from one car to another car to another car. So because if somebody found out who I got it from, they probably would kill me to get to it. And so I remember one relative begging me, put me up against the wall. I told him, man, you better get off of me. And then he said, hey, Bento, you used to be like me. You used to get high. And I said, thank you. And he goes, what are you saying thank you for? Because you used the word used to. Appreciate that. And so that was a horrible background. I only went to the 2 months in the 10th grade because I had a fight in school, and I actually stabbed a teacher. So I walked out of that school, and then they put me in the worst school in Philadelphia. And so you had to fight to get in and fight to get out. Mm-hmm. There was a statue of this lion, and the gangs made you kiss the lion's butt. If you did that, then you better not bring any money, any nice jackets, anything. They were going to take it from you. Well, I'm not going to kiss any animal's butt, live or otherwise. So I had to fight a bunch of guys. And then when I go to class, watch this one. This is 10th grade. And in class, everybody's listening to music, everybody's yapping, having sex in the back of the class. And the teacher's trying to teach the 2 times table, the 3 times table. I mean, it was such a mess. The teacher would just sit down and say, I'm getting paid no matter what. Mm. And so I had left school. I only read comic books, and watch this one. I liked Greek philosophy. And I liked the story of the Godfather, especially Lucky Luciano. I read his story. I wanted to be like him. See, he was my hero, so to speak. And so educationally, it was nil. So now I'm a Christian. Going to this church. I'm teaching Sunday school. I go to an extension of their it was their college, but it was for people in the inner city that didn't have a degree, didn't have a diploma. And so I went there. This was the Assemblies of God, or the Assemblies of God Biblical Institute. And after 2 years of going there, I started teaching there. And they thought, wow, he knows some. But then when I was teaching the Sunday school class, youth, and I got to Romans 5, and I remember telling the class, notice what it says there, that when we were God's enemy, Christ died for us. And I told them, when you get up tomorrow morning, you don't need to think about, is this the day that you're going to lose your salvation? Because you cannot lose it. Amen. The pastor heard that, called me outside, and said that I can't teach that. Because remember, they're Armenian. They don't believe that. Then I told them, we do have a problem. And so I met with the leadership, which they call the Synod. My wife and I met with them. And the pastor asked me, what do I believe? Okay. And I told him, I believe this is, remember, I didn't know anything about Reformed theology. So I told him, I believe that man is dead as a doorknob, cannot go to God. And if God calls him, because the dead don't move, God calls him, he comes. And when he comes, he stays. Mm-hmm. And he asked me, where did I learn that? And I said, Romans, John, Deuteronomy. He said, no. What book did you read? I said, Romans, John, Deuteronomy. And then he told me, what he told me, he said, what you have said in your own words was the theology of this heretic called John Calvin. Never heard of him before. I asked the pastor, what church does this guy pastor? How can I get a hold of this John Calvin? And he said, no, he's dead. Well, at the time, there was no internet at all. So I went to this so-called Christian bookstore in downtown Philadelphia. It's still there on 8th and Walnut. And I'm going in there trying to find the Christian book that had something about John Calvin. They had this little book that was John Calvin's debate with Cardinal Cedelote, a Roman Catholic. From that, I had to call the publishers, and I couldn't. I only got just a little bit of literature. But I knew that I wasn't Pentecostal anymore. Well, the friend that used to work with me, my bodyguard, okay, he was going to what he called, at the time, it was a community church. It's a large church still in Philadelphia. And he told me that his church believes that you can't lose your salvation. And they don't believe in jumping up and down and throwing around furniture. I said, great. So I went, started ministering. On Saturday night, we had the church had a school, had a gymnasium, and we had like 8 to 15 guys working with us, some girls, and we would get between 75 and 100 kids, inner city kids, to come. We give them Bible studies, and they would play basketball, which was the big thing, still is. But then one Saturday, the afternoon, we would go out and we would knock on doors to sign up kids, okay, for Friday evening. So I was walking with about 8 guys and girls, and the guys saw this basketball court. So they asked me, they're tired, they've been walking around, it's hot, but they play basketball. And I said, sure. So we went, they were playing basketball. The associate pastor that was in charge of evangelism drove past. He saw the guys playing basketball. When we got back to the church building, he tells us that because we were playing basketball for that hour and a half, he said about 100 kids are going to go to hell. I looked at him and I told him, if the salvation of anybody depends on Ben Alvira, I feel sorry for him. I met with the pastor. The pastor supported him. So I left. Now, I didn't know Spanish, and I wanted to learn some Spanish. So there was this friend of mine that I knew for years. He tried to witness to me, and he has a Hispanic, a Baptist church in Philly. So we go. He tells me that he's a Calvinist. What he doesn't tell me is that he's a 4-point Calvinist and extremely dispensational. But so was I. Okay? So I went while I was there, and I told my wife that I wanted to go into ministry. So I want to go to Bible college. I want to be, I want to be a good pastor, someone that knows. So I want to go to Bible college. My wife reminded me that, 10th graders don't go to college. And so that'll be okay. So at the time, they didn't have, training centers where you could study for your GED or anything. No. I went downtown Philly to the Department of Education, and I took the 5 tests on the 5 subjects. Each of them was about a 3-hour test. So you would take them like each Saturday, take one because they were killers. I took them all the same day because all I did was eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I did not know mathematics. I did not know anything about algebra. I didn't know what verbs, nouns, adjectives were, know anything about history, know anything about science. And I said, oh man, this is the Lord's telling me you can't go to college. I passed. Unbelievable. So my wife, I passed. I got the notice. So then I wanted to go to college. The Baptist pastor, since at that time this college agreed with him, he recommended that college. And it was Philadelphia College of the Bible, which is now Carnes. It was extremely dispensational, extremely fundamentalist. And the founder was, by the way, C.I. Schofield. He was the founder of that college. Well, I went. They didn't accept me. I went again. They didn't accept me. I asked to meet with the board because I looked at the fine print. If you're not accepted, you can meet with the board. I met with the board. I begged them. They didn't want, because they said I was too far behind. That's why they rejected me. I told them, put me on probation for 1 semester. Finally, they did. Now, I could not read much, and I stuttered, remember? And so the first class that I went to was English Lit, and for our final, we had to do a paper. And the professor said, I want no dangling participles. So I raised my hand and I asked, what's a participle? And how do you stop it from dangling? Remember, because the professor put his head on his desk and said, oh, no. Okay? I was on the dean's list end of that semester. I used to stutter a lot. I couldn't speak in public. I don't remember when that went away, but it went away. Okay? I self-taught myself to read because I couldn't read, and so I speed read now. Never took any classes on reading. It's just, that's just the Lord's doing because I was an idiot. Okay? And so to put it bluntly, I was an idiot. Okay? I went to the college. While at the college, when I was in my third year, there was a fourth year student that befriended me, kept inviting me to a Bible study. And I kept saying no because I was too busy. I had my 3 kids, plus now we had a little girl that we were raising too. So I had 4 kids. I was taking between 18 to 20 credits a semester because I wanted to finish in 3 years. 3.5 years. 3 years plus 1 summer. And so I was taking a lot of credits. Plus I had to work. I was getting like 3 hours sleep every day because we still had to have family devotion. I still had to play with my kids. I still had to spend time with my wife. I refused to give that up. And I would never study on Sunday. That was worship day. So if I was going to get a test on Monday, I better study on Friday and Saturday. And Saturday during the day, I would not study. That was playtime with my kids. So I had to keep this balance. But somehow, the Lord worked it out. And then I went to this Bible study to this elderly man's house. And he began to teach us. There was 5 of us. And like my eyes just lit up. Because he was talking about the covenant. He was talking about that we all have presuppositions. Got that? And one is that our presupposition is that God exists, not just any God, the God of the Bible, and that he has revealed himself in scripture, in creation, and through his son. So he's given us this apologetics and what is called prologomena, before you, theology proper, basically, and then they used today. The guy's name was Cornelius Van Til. Okay. So for 9 months, I went to his home. Bible study. And that's how I learned the Reformed faith.
Wow.
You wanted to know how I learned the Reformed faith? Van Til.
Wow.
So he introduced me to, the Ryries and Abraham Piper, Turrington, and especially this guy that he liked, the one that wrote Bavinck. Remember Bavinck? And that's how I learned the Reformed faith. He taught me, and I grew. Now I was going to the school, to the college still, and so I was taking a class on the book of Hebrews. We got to Hebrews 9, and I asked the professor, could he tell us how a Reformed theologian would interpret this? And his response was, I'm not here to tell you what idiots believe, because I use the example of this guy. What's his name? Looking at it, Warfield. How Warfield interpreted it. And he called Warfield an idiot.
Wow.
So I put my head down. After class, myself and 6 other students went to him, and I told them, look, you should have just said you don't have time to teach it, but how can you call a godly man who's dead an idiot? I said, could you recant that? He said, no, he stands by what he said. So I quit. I lost about $4,000, but I quit. The other 6 guys, they quit with me. That's when then Van Til told me to go to Reformed Episcopal. So another reason why I went to RE, because at the time, Westminster, you had to have your bachelor's first. At RE, you could go and you can have your bachelor doing. So I could finish it.
Okay.
But RE accepted me because I had just about 15 credits left, and Westminster said that they can't bend the rule here. Now they do, by the way. See, because at RE you got your Bachelor's of Divinity, but then you could turn it into your Master's of Divinity. Okay, and so I got my Bachelor's in education, so I could teach, because I knew that I needed that, because the Lord sent me to the inner city, which means that I'm going to plant churches, and the people there are going to be poor, and 10% of almost nothing leaves almost nothing. So I had a family. So I knew I could teach, and at the same time then I could pastor, I could start ministries. And so, but I had to have that teaching degree. I had to have it. And I told guys that if the Lord's calling you to the inner city, where the salary is going to be, unless and the denomination is going to support you, forever. If not, you got to get a degree on something that you can use. And education is the best thing to have if you're going into the ministry, because that way you can teach. But at the same time, then you can teach, especially if you're teaching at a Christian school, at a Christian high school. Like at first I did elementary school, then I did high school, so that what I was preparing to teach in the school, that's what I was teaching in my church.
Right.
See, so I didn't have to do a study here and then do here. And I saw a lot of young guys do that. And I go, you're going to kill yourself. If you're teaching in school and it's a Old Testament survey, then teach that to your church. They need that. See? And so I graduated with my bachelor's, then I went to seminary. And then a friend introduced me to the OPC. He was going to seminary. He was 1 year ahead of me. Last year, he went to be with the Lord. Tremendous man of the Lord. He really took me under his wing. I learned how to treat interns by the way he treated me. And so, I have that to thank for. And he introduced me to the OPC. Well, I had to do an intern. Remember, seminary, Formed Episcopal, very pastoral. So I had to do an intern under a pastor. Well, he introduced me to a fantastic pastor. RE is in Philadelphia, but this was a church in Jersey, and it was an OPC church, which is still there. And the pastor who recently retired, Al Stevers. Okay. So I did my intern under him. There was still one problem. I wasn't sure about infant baptism. So I asked him, can you give me the best that I could read on infant baptism? And he said, no. He gave me a systematic theology book by what's this guy's name? Oh man, he's with the Reformed Church at Grand Rapids, Herman Hoeksema. And he said, just read what he says about the covenant, because he uses verse after verse, text after text. And he proves that first, everybody is, if you're a human being, you have a covenantal relationship before God. You're either going to be a covenant breaker or it's going to be fulfilled in Christ. And then, as I learned the covenant of grace, and he showed it, without even him mentioning infant baptism, I came to the conclusion, wow, to enter the covenant, you must be baptized. So my kids must be baptized. So Al Stevers baptized my kids. And so now I was completely reformed, which my parents thought, especially my mom thought, whoa. My father, who was the drunk, 14 years before he died, I was privileged to pray for him. And he came to the Lord.
Wow.
And though he accompanied my mom to the Pentecostal church, he had become reformed. In fact, my mom, before she died, basically accepted the 5 points. And my dad did. Wow. By the way, my sister was not a believer when my mom died. She became a believer when my father died. I remember that she called me and she was having problems with her 2 kids, and her husband was a cop. So he was a hard guy. And so she wanted some advice. And I told her, well, as a Christian. And she said, no. Put away your Christianity. Could you talk to me as just my brother? And I told her, that's a problem. Because Christianity is not a part of me. Mm. Christianity is who I am. Mm. When I open my mouth, I'm speaking as a Christian because that's who I am. So if you don't want me, if you don't want me to speak with who I am, then don't ask me to give you advice. Mm. And then a few years later, she came to the Lord. Mm. And then her husband did. So now they're believers too. And when she came to the Lord, she called me and she said, now I know what you were saying.
Yeah. Wow.
See? And so it was just tremendous how the Lord has been working in my family. And my wife and I, throughout the years, pastored churches in inner city Philadelphia. Then there was a contract out on me by drug dealers.
Wow.
Because I spoke against them. I mean, my wife and I did something that I never advise anybody to do. When I came to the Lord, I stayed in the same neighborhood. But the temptation will be great. Right. But I wanted to reach out to the people that I used to sell to and the people that I got high. And there was a group of about 17 guys, and 11 of them are either missionaries, have been in the pastorate. Wow. I got one who just became a deacon in a church in Georgia. He was one of my best friends. And so the Lord used me to reach them. But I would never advise a person to stay. The temptation is too great. Plus, you can get killed. Because I spoke out against a drug dealer that put out a contract on me, in which they almost killed my wife.
Wow.
And they had my oldest daughter trapped against the wall.
Wow.
When I came. And I come to my house one day, and we used to live in apartments, townhouses, in which we had one, and my wife was the manager. And so a guy went to the office and pointed a gun at her. When she described him to me, I knew who he was. So I went to his house, smashed the door, grabbed him by the throat, and I told him, you do not touch my wife. Then I started talking to myself where I had him by the throat. So I have to get out of here. I can't stay here. My family. One of the elders of the church that we had started in Philly, he had moved to Florida. To Winter Haven, Florida. And he has said, Ben, whenever you want to come to paradise, come on down. Of course, Florida is not paradise because people live there. People live here because I'm living in Florida now. And so, but we moved to Florida because of that, because of the contract. And I put my family and my life in danger. And other people, I mean, there's more that I could say about it because there was this drug dealer that was shot and crippled, led him to the Lord. And now his boss wanted to kill him. And I had to come between him and his boss.
Well, that's part one of this interview. We're focusing part one on more of his backstory and Ben's context. And it honestly it's a captivating story. So next week, you're not going to want to miss part two. We're going to focus mainly on his ministry and where he went from here. It's a wild story. So please tune back in next week. Remember to tune into the Happy Holy Hour, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next week.